Have you ever tried something simple in your relationship? You stop initiating sex for a while just to see what happens. And suddenly, nothing happens. Days go by, sometimes weeks. And you begin to wonder whether she even thinks about intimacy the way you do. For many men, that moment feels confusing and even a little painful, because it starts raising questions about attraction, chemistry, and whether something in the relationship has quietly shifted. But here's the truth that surprises a lot of men. The reason women rarely initiate sex often has very little to do with attraction itself. In fact, many men unknowingly create the exact dynamic that discourages women from initiating intimacy in the first place. And once you see how those dynamics work, you'll understand why it happens and how to change it. Let's start with a pattern many men create without realizing it. Imagine a typical evening. You're sitting on the couch. She leans into you. You wrap your arm around her. She rests her head on your shoulder. At first it feels warm and natural, just closeness. But then something happens. Your hand starts moving. The kiss gets deeper. The moment slowly turns into an attempt to push things further. Now, here's the problem most men never notice. If this happens every single time, a pattern begins to form in her mind. Cuddle leads to sex. Kissing leads to sex. Touch leads to sex. Over time, something subtle but powerful starts happening psychologically. She begins to avoid initiating intimacy altogether. Not because she doesn't enjoy closeness, not because she doesn't want you, but because she knows where it usually ends. This is a classic form of behavioral conditioning. When one action constantly leads to pressure or expectation, the brain learns to avoid starting that action in the first place. So instead of initiating affection, she waits. She lets you start things. Because if she doesn't begin it, she doesn't have to manage the moment where it suddenly turns sexual before she's ready. Many women actually want physical closeness during the day. They want to cuddle. They want affection. They want to feel close to you without it automatically turning into a sexual negotiation. But when every small gesture becomes a doorway to sex, something surprising happens. Affection disappears first, and when affection disappears, initiation disappears with it. In other words, the very pressure men create in order to get more intimacy often produces the opposite result. She stops initiating. Not because she has no desire, but because starting intimacy feels like opening a door she may not want to walk through every time. And this leads to a deeper realization that most men have never been taught. Because the truth is, women experience sexual desire very differently from men. Most men grow up believing sexual desire works the same way for everyone. You see something attractive. You feel arousal. You want sex. Simple, immediate, direct. For many men, desire behaves like a switch. It turns on quickly. But for many women, desire doesn't work like a switch. It works more like a slow ignition. Instead of spontaneous desire appearing out of nowhere, female desire is often responsive. It grows out of context, emotional atmosphere, and physical closeness. In other words, the sequence is often reversed. For many men, the order is desire first, intimacy second. For many women, the order can be connection first, arousal second, desire after that. This difference has been studied in modern sexual psychology. Researchers like Dr. Emily Nagoski, known for her work on female sexual desire, describe something called responsive desire, a pattern where desire develops in response to stimulation, closeness, or emotional connection rather than appearing spontaneously. That means many women don't start the evening already feeling turned on. They become turned on as intimacy builds. And this is where a lot of men accidentally sabotage the process. Because when a man rushes directly toward the end goal, he skips the very phase where female desire is still waking up. Think about the type of romantic or erotic content that many women enjoy. It rarely jumps straight into explicit action. There's tension, eye contact, slow moments, Anticipation. A build-up. That build-up is not just storytelling. It mirrors how female arousal often unfolds in real life. But many men approach intimacy like a race with a finish line. They escalate quickly. They move fast. And without realizing it, they skip the emotional and sensory build-up that actually fuels female desire. Ironically, when a man learns to slow down, the dynamic begins to flip. When he allows moments to breathe. When he creates anticipation instead of rushing past it. When closeness doesn't automatically become pressure. Something interesting starts happening. The tension begins to build on her side. She starts thinking about you later. She starts replaying moments in her head. And eventually, she becomes the one who starts leaning closer first. Because desire has had time to grow instead of being forced into existence. But even this psychological difference isn't the whole story. Biology also plays a powerful role in why men and women approach sexual initiation so differently. There's another factor quietly shaping this dynamic, and this one sits deeper than psychology. Biology, specifically hormones. One hormone in particular plays a major role in sexual drive and pursuit behavior: testosterone. Testosterone is strongly linked to libido. It influences the brain regions connected to reward, motivation, and sexual arousal. It also affects how quickly sexual desire is triggered. And this is where one of the biggest biological differences between men and women appears. Men produce significantly higher levels of testosterone than women. In fact, male testosterone levels can be several times higher on average. This hormone is responsible for many male sexual characteristics, but it also fuels a stronger baseline drive towards sexual pursuit. Higher testosterone is associated with increased sexual thoughts, stronger libido, and a greater tendency to act on sexual impulses. In simple terms, it creates urgency. This helps explain why men often feel desire more frequently and more suddenly. The brain receives a stimulus, something attractive, a physical cue, a visual trigger, and the system activates quickly. But for women, testosterone levels are much lower. Women do produce testosterone in the ovaries and adrenal glands, but in far smaller quantities. As a result, sexual desire tends to be less impulsive and less aggressive. It doesn't mean women don't experience desire. They absolutely do. But that desire is often less about immediate biological urgency and more about the environment around them. Where men often feel a strong internal push towards sex, women often respond more strongly to context. The emotional climate, the feeling of closeness, the sense of safety and attraction in the moment. So while a man might feel desire first and then look for an opportunity, a woman may experience desire after the environment has already become inviting. You could say the difference like this: men often experience sexual urgency. Women often respond to sexual invitation. And when men misunderstand this difference, they sometimes assume something is wrong. They assume the attraction is fading. They assume their partner simply doesn't want them anymore. But in many cases, the real issue isn't attraction at all. It's that female desire often depends on something even more powerful than biology: emotional connection. There is something many men underestimate when it comes to female desire: emotional safety. For a lot of women, sexual openness doesn't begin in the bedroom. It begins long before that, in the emotional atmosphere of the relationship. A woman who feels valued, respected, and emotionally connected to her partner is far more likely to express her desire freely. But when that emotional connection weakens, sexual initiation often disappears with it. Think about how a typical day unfolds for many couples. You both wake up. You rush to work. You handle responsibilities. You deal with stress, deadlines, messages, problems. By the time evening arrives, she may already feel mentally drained. Now imagine that during the day there was very little emotional connection. No real conversation. No meaningful attention. No small moments where she felt seen or appreciated. Then later that night, physical intimacy suddenly becomes the focus. For many women, the emotional gap between those two moments feels enormous. It's not that she doesn't care about you. It's not that attraction has vanished. It's that her emotional system hasn't been engaged yet. Many men unintentionally treat their partner primarily as a sexual partner during intimate moments, but overlook the emotional foundation that makes those moments possible. For women, desire is often connected to feeling valued as a person first, feeling heard, feeling appreciated, feeling like her presence matters beyond physical attraction. When those emotional signals are strong, something interesting happens. Her defenses lower, her comfort increases, and with that comfort comes a willingness to express desire without hesitation. Because desire, for many women, grows in an environment where vulnerability feels safe. If a woman feels judged, ignored, or emotionally disconnected, she may still care deeply about her partner. But initiating sex requires a level of openness that doesn't exist in an emotionally cold environment. In contrast, when a woman feels emotionally secure, something shifts. She relaxes. She becomes more playful. She becomes more expressive. And eventually, she becomes more willing to take the first step herself. Because at that point, intimacy no longer feels like pressure. It feels like connection. But emotional safety isn't the only biological rhythm shaping female desire. There's another influence that men often overlook completely: timing. Women's bodies operate on a hormonal cycle that influences energy levels, mood, and sexual desire throughout the month. These changes are not random. They follow biological rhythms connected to fertility and hormone fluctuations. During certain phases of the menstrual cycle, libido can naturally rise. Around ovulation, when estrogen levels increase and the body enters its most fertile window, many women experience a noticeable shift. They may feel more flirtatious, more physically responsive, and more interested in intimacy. Some women even report feeling more confident, more playful, and more drawn to physical closeness during this period. In other words, their bodies are biologically more receptive to sexual interaction. But the opposite can also be true during other phases of the cycle. In the days leading up to menstruation, often referred to as PMS, many women experience fatigue, irritability, physical discomfort, or emotional sensitivity. During this time, sexual interest may drop significantly. It's not about attraction, it's about physiology. Hormones such as estrogen and progesterone shift throughout the month, influencing mood, energy, and the brain systems connected to desire. And on top of these biological rhythms, real life still happens. Stress at work, conflict with friends, a difficult day, mental overload. All of these factors can influence sexual mood as well. For many women, desire doesn't operate like a constant signal that stays at the same level every day. It's more like a tide that rises and falls depending on both biological timing and emotional context. Some days the conditions are naturally favorable. Other days, the system simply isn't there. Understanding this rhythm changes how you interpret her behavior. Instead of assuming rejection or loss of attraction, you begin to see that female desire often follows patterns that are cyclical and contextual. But even beyond biology and mood, there is another reason many women hesitate to initiate sex. And this one runs deep in the psychology of how women have been socially conditioned to approach intimacy. There is another reason many women hesitate to initiate sex, and it has very little to do with desire. It has to do with risk. For generations, the dating dynamic has been framed in a very specific way. Men are expected to pursue. Women are expected to be pursued. Even in modern relationships, that script still quietly shapes behavior. From an early age, many women are taught, directly or indirectly, that expressing too much sexual initiative can be interpreted in the wrong way. Too forward, too aggressive, too easy. Because of that, many women grow up learning to manage their sexual expression carefully. Not necessarily because they want to, but because of how it might be perceived. Now add another psychological layer to that. Rejection. For men, sexual rejection often hits the ego. It can feel embarrassing or frustrating, but it rarely attacks a man's core identity. For many women, the experience can feel different. Part of a woman's identity, historically and culturally, has been tied to desirability, the idea that being wanted is connected to her value. So when a woman takes the risk of initiating and the response isn't enthusiastic, the emotional interpretation can be much harsher. It doesn't just feel like a moment of rejection. It can feel like a judgment about her attractiveness, her femininity, or her worth. That emotional cost can be powerful enough to keep many women from taking the risk in the first place. So instead, they choose the safer route. They let the man initiate. That way, if intimacy happens, it happens without the vulnerability of having made the first move. And if it doesn't happen, they avoid the sting of personal rejection. This doesn't mean women lack desire. It means that expressing that desire sometimes carries a psychological risk they've been taught to avoid. And once that pattern becomes established in a relationship, it can quietly reinforce itself over time. She waits for you to initiate. You become used to initiating. And the dynamic stabilizes in that pattern. But there is another very practical factor that often kills sexual initiation long before any of these psychological dynamics even appear. Exhaustion. There is one more factor that quietly destroys sexual initiation in many relationships, and it's far less mysterious than most people think. Exhaustion. For many couples, especially those living together or raising a family, daily life comes with a long list of invisible responsibilities: work obligations, household chores, planning meals, managing schedules, taking care of children, remembering appointments, handling emotional conflicts in the family. A lot of this mental load often falls disproportionately on women. Even when both partners are working, many women still carry a large share of the organizational and emotional labor required to keep daily life running. Over time, that constant responsibility drains energy, and energy is the raw fuel of sexual desire. When the brain is overloaded with tasks and stress, the body naturally prioritizes recovery and stability over sexual arousal. Stress hormones like cortisol rise, mental fatigue increases, and libido quietly fades into the background. This is why a woman who feels overwhelmed by responsibilities may still love her partner deeply, still find him attractive, and still value the relationship. But at the end of a long day, her mind and body simply don't have the capacity to shift into a state of desire. She's tired, not uninterested, and this is where many men misread the situation. They interpret the lack of sexual initiation as a lack of attraction. But sometimes the real problem has nothing to do with attraction at all. Sometimes the problem is that her energy has been spent long before the evening even begins. When a woman feels physically and mentally drained, sex becomes another task rather than a moment of connection. And when intimacy starts to feel like another obligation, initiation disappears almost completely. So now you can start to see the full picture. There are psychological reasons, biological rhythms, social pressures, and everyday exhaustion. But understanding the causes is only half the story. The real question is how to change the dynamic. Now that you understand the reasons behind the pattern, the next question becomes obvious. How do you change it? The answer is not about convincing a woman to initiate sex. You don't pressure desire into existence. You create the environment where it can grow naturally. The first shift is removing pressure from intimacy. When every hug, every kiss, and every moment of closeness immediately turns into an attempt to escalate, intimacy starts to feel like a negotiation. But when affection is allowed to exist on its own, without expectation, something powerful happens. Closeness becomes safe again. And once closeness feels safe, she becomes more willing to initiate it herself. The second shift is slowing down the pace of sexual escalation. Many men move quickly toward the final outcome. But when you slow the rhythm of intimacy, anticipation begins to build. Moments stretch longer. Eye contact lingers. Playfulness increases. And over time, that tension starts to move in both directions instead of only coming from you. The third shift is communication. Many couples never actually talk about their sexual expectations. A simple, honest conversation about desire, about what both of you enjoy, what makes each other feel wanted, and how intimacy fits into the relationship, can remove a surprising amount of confusion. Clarity creates comfort. Comfort creates openness. Another important factor is reinforcement. When she does initiate, even in a small way, your reaction matters. Appreciation encourages repetition. If she feels that her effort is welcomed and valued, she becomes more confident expressing that side of herself again. And finally, there is something many men overlook completely. Support outside the bedroom. When responsibilities are shared. When stress is reduced. When the relationship feels like a partnership rather than a burden. Energy returns. And when energy returns, desire often follows. Because the truth is simple. Most women don't resist intimacy. They respond to the emotional and physical environment around them. When that environment feels safe, relaxed, and connected, something shifts naturally. She no longer waits for the moment to begin. Sometimes, she becomes the one who starts it. Women rarely initiate sex for reasons most men never consider. It's not always about attraction fading. It's not always about desire disappearing. More often, it's a combination of pressures that slowly reshape the dynamic in a relationship. Sometimes it's the pattern where every moment of closeness automatically turns into sexual escalation. Sometimes it's the fundamental difference in how male and female desire actually works. Sometimes biology plays its part. Hormones, cycles, energy levels that shift throughout the month. And sometimes the explanation is far more human and ordinary. Emotional disconnection, social conditioning, or simply exhaustion from carrying too many responsibilities for too long. When you begin to understand these mechanisms, something important changes. You stop interpreting her behavior as rejection, and you start seeing the environment that shapes her desire. Because attraction inside a relationship rarely disappears randomly. It responds to the emotional climate two people create together. When a woman feels emotionally safe, when she feels appreciated beyond physical attraction, when intimacy doesn't feel like pressure but connection, her defenses start to lower, and something surprising begins to happen. She doesn't just respond to desire, she begins to express it, sometimes subtly, sometimes playfully, and sometimes by being the one who reaches for you first. If this perspective shifted the way you see intimacy in your relationship, make sure you subscribe. This channel is dedicated to one thing: helping men understand the deeper psychology behind attraction, relationships, and female behavior. And now, I'm curious about your experience. Are you usually the one initiating intimacy in your relationship? Or have you found ways to create a dynamic where she starts it too? Share your thoughts in the comments. Because the most honest conversations about relationships often start right in progress. The energy gets colder, the replies get shorter, and without realizing it, you're no longer being chosen. You're being kept. Most men don't lose a woman because they did something wrong. They lose her because they never noticed the exact moment her interest died, and by the time they feel it, it's already over. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Women give away their level of interest almost instantly. Not with words, but with behavior. If you don't know how to read it, you end up investing where respect is already gone. If you do, you stop wasting emotional energy and take your power back. Women aren't confusing. They're consistent. What confuses men is that they keep listening to words instead of watching patterns. In this video, I'm breaking down 5 instant signs that reveal when a woman isn't interested, so you're never left guessing where you stand. Each one shows you exactly how she's positioning you in her mind. If this kind of clarity matters to you, like the video and subscribe. This channel is for men who want to understand women without losing themselves. And it starts by seeing what's right in front of you. Most men grow up believing one simple rule. If a woman isn't interested, she'll say it. She'll be honest, direct, clear. That belief is comforting and completely wrong. Women rarely reject men with words. They reject them with behavior, quietly, gradually, without ever announcing it. And this is where so many men lose power without realizing it, because they keep waiting for a verbal answer that is never coming. Here's the part no one prepares you for. Saying no costs women something. It creates tension. It invites confrontation. It risks backlash. So instead of closing a door outright, most women leave it slightly open. Not because they want you, but because keeping options costs them nothing. They avoid the word no to preserve choice. They soften their disinterest to avoid conflict. And they allow just enough attention to keep validation flowing. From the outside, it looks confusing. From the inside, it's very consistent. This is why men stay longer than they should. They keep explaining, keep adjusting, keep giving more, thinking effort will turn ambiguity into desire. But attraction doesn't grow from negotiation. It fades when a man ignores what's already being shown. Behavior is the truth language here, always has been. When interest is present, it shows up naturally, through attention, warmth, investment, and ease. When interest is gone, it doesn't disappear loudly. It withdraws in small, deniable ways. And the man who understands this doesn't argue with reality. He reads it early. Power doesn't come from forcing clarity out of someone who benefits from staying vague. Power comes from recognizing patterns before emotional investment turns into emotional debt. The strongest men aren't waiting to be chosen. They're observing whether a woman is choosing them at all. Once you stop expecting honesty in words, you start seeing honesty everywhere else. In how she looks at you, in how she responds, in how she prioritizes, or doesn't. And when you learn to trust behavior over hope, you stop chasing explanations. You stop performing for approval. You stop offering effort where interest has already expired. That shift alone changes everything because now you're no longer reacting. You're reading the situation as it is and deciding accordingly. And that brings us to the first place women reveal the truth long before they ever say it out loud. Number 1, her eyes are already leaving. Before a woman pulls away with words, she pulls away with attention. And attention always shows up in the eyes first. When a woman is genuinely interested, her focus settles. Her gaze stays with you. Not because she's trying to be polite, but because nothing else in the room feels more relevant than the man in front of her. But when interest drops, her eyes stop landing and start scanning. She looks past you instead of at you, over your shoulder, toward the door, toward movement, toward possibilities. Her attention fractures, and it's not subtle once you know what you're looking for. The eyes don't linger. They dart. They disengage. They move like she's already somewhere else mentally, because she is. Men often misread this. They assume distraction means nerves, shyness, or boredom that can be fixed with better conversation. So they talk more. They explain more. They try harder, and that's the mistake. A woman doesn't look away when she's deciding how to connect with you. She looks away when she's deciding what else might be better. You'll see it everywhere once you stop ignoring it. At a bar, she keeps glancing around every time someone walks in. At a coffee shop, her phone comes out mid-conversation, not because it rang, but because her interest did. In texting, she leaves your message unread while staying active everywhere else. That's not busyness. That's priority. Here's the part most men don't want to accept. Women look at what they're still considering. When she's interested, her eyes naturally come back to you. When they don't, it's because she's already evaluating other options, and the more you push when her eyes are elsewhere, the lower your value drops. Attention can't be negotiated. It responds to presence, not pressure. The strongest move in this moment isn't to compete harder. It's to notice faster. When you pull your energy back instead of chasing her attention, something shifts. You stop feeding an interaction that's already losing momentum. You stop auditioning. And suddenly, the dynamic changes. Not because you demanded anything, but because you removed what was being taken for granted. A man who doesn't chase wandering eyes becomes the man whose presence is felt when he's no longer trying to be seen. And that's when interest either recalibrates or disappears completely. Either way, you win by not lying to yourself. Number 2, her voice loses emotional color. A woman's voice will always tell you how she feels before her words ever do. You can hear attraction. You can hear curiosity. And you can hear when interest has quietly drained out of the interaction. When a woman is into you, her voice carries movement. It rises and falls. It speeds up. It softens. There's warmth in it. An unforced liveliness that doesn't need effort. That's dopamine at work. Interest stimulates energy, and energy changes tone. But when that interest fades, the voice flattens. Responses get shorter. The pace slows. The tone turns neutral, almost mechanical. Not angry, not emotional, just empty. And this is where men misinterpret what's happening. They tell themselves she's tired, stressed, busy, having a long week. Anything except the truth. But listen carefully to the contrast. She sounds animated with her friends, engaged on the phone, alive when talking about something that excites her. Then she turns to you, and suddenly the color disappears. Same woman, same day, different energy. That's not exhaustion. That's selective disengagement. Texting works the same way. When interest is there, messages carry rhythm. Emojis appear naturally. Words stretch. Replies feel present. When interest drops, communication gets stripped down to the bare minimum. One-word answers. Delays without explanation. Conversations that feel like obligations instead of exchanges. And the worst thing a man can do here is overcompensate. He starts adding more enthusiasm to fill the gap. He becomes more expressive to balance her flatness. He tries to revive something that's already losing oxygen. But attraction doesn't respond to pressure. It responds to polarity. When one side drains, the other side leaning in only accelerates the imbalance. Silence, restraint, and emotional self-control do more than excitement ever could in this moment. When you stop rewarding low energy with high effort, you change the dynamic. You communicate, without saying a word, that you're not here to carry an interaction alone, and that either forces her interest to reappear, or it reveals that it's already gone. Both outcomes save you time. Both protect your position. A man who doesn't chase emotional scraps becomes the man whose presence is felt when he withdraws it. And that quiet shift sets the stage for something most men never see coming. The moment when her tone doesn't just flatten, but starts placing you beneath her. There is a very specific moment where everything quietly shifts, and most men miss it completely. It's not when she leaves. It's not when she ghosts. It's not when she says she's confused. It's the moment you start giving more to compensate for what she stopped giving. You feel the change before you understand it. The warmth is gone. The ease is gone. And instead of stepping back, you lean in. You explain more. You soften your boundaries. You try to be more understanding, more patient, more accommodating, hoping that effort will restore what disappeared. That's the pivot. That's where power leaks out. Men are taught that persistence equals strength. But in attraction, persistence in the face of withdrawal reads as insecurity. The more you explain yourself, the more you negotiate for connection, the more you reveal that you're invested in an outcome she's already drifting away from. And right here, without a single argument, your position changes. Number 3. Her tone starts placing you beneath her. Tone isn't just sound, it's hierarchy. When a woman respects you, her tone carries openness, curiosity, softness. There's space for you in it. But when she no longer fears losing you, that tone sharpens. She interrupts you. She sounds impatient. She responds with clipped answers. She sighs. She rushes you. Nothing overt, nothing dramatic, just enough edge to test whether you'll accept being spoken to differently. And most men do. They brush it off. They rationalize it. They tell themselves she's just stressed. But what she's actually doing is recalibrating the dynamic, seeing how much distance she can create without you pushing back. Here's the part that stings. Women don't lower their tone with men they value. They lower it with men they believe will stay anyway. Watch the contrast. Notice how she speaks to someone she wants to impress. Then notice how she speaks to you. That difference is information. And it's more honest than anything she'll ever say. The mistake men make here is continuing to invest while their status is being quietly downgraded. They reward dismissiveness with patience, disrespect with understanding. And every time they do, the imbalance locks in deeper. Respect doesn't come from demanding better treatment. It comes from refusing to participate when the standard drops. Silence does more than arguments ever could. Pulling back does more than pleading. Calm withdrawal communicates something words never will. This version of you doesn't get access to me. And that's the moment the dynamic either corrects itself or ends. So ask yourself honestly, why are you still investing where respect is already gone? Number 4. Her body is closing, even if her mouth isn't. A woman can say the right things and still be telling you no. Her body will always be more honest than her words, because it doesn't negotiate, it reacts. When interest is present, the body opens naturally. When it's gone, the body pulls away before the mind ever explains why. This is instinctive, not calculated, and that's why it's so reliable. When a woman is drawn to you, her body orients toward you without effort. Her shoulders face you. Her torso leans in. Her feet point in your direction. There's ease in how she occupies space around you. She isn't guarding herself. She's available. When that changes, everything subtly shifts. Her arms cross. Her legs angle away. She leans back instead of forward. She creates small barriers, holding a drink between you, adjusting her bag, turning slightly toward the room instead of toward you. None of it is dramatic, but all of it is deliberate on a biological level. Men often ignore these signals because her words haven't changed yet. She's still being polite, still saying yeah, or sure, or maybe. And that politeness keeps men leaning in when they should be stepping back. But here's the truth most men miss. Women can say yes out of courtesy. Their bodies never do. Watch how this plays out. On a date, the first half feels open. Conversation flows. She leans closer. Then something shifts. The chair moves back an inch. Her posture closes. She stops mirroring your movements. That's not random. That's withdrawal. In group settings, it's even clearer. Instead of angling toward you, she angles toward her friends. She leans into them, not you. Physical proximity follows interest. Distance follows disengagement. Even in texting, this shows up. Responses stall. Plans become vague. Maybe replaces specifics. That's physical distance translated into behavior. The same closing, just expressed digitally. The mistake men make here is pressing forward. They move closer when she moves back. They increase effort when her body is signaling retreat. And every step forward she didn't invite lowers perceived value. Attraction breathes through space. When you ignore her need for distance, you smother what little interest might still exist. The man who notices this early doesn't argue with it. He mirrors the distance. He relaxes back. He stops pushing. And that simple restraint does something powerful. It forces honesty into the dynamic. Because when you stop advancing on someone who's retreating, their interest either returns or reveals that it was already gone. Both outcomes protect you. Number 5. Zero investment is the loudest rejection. This is the strongest sign of all because it removes all ambiguity. When a woman is interested, she invests. She asks questions. She adds energy. She participates. Interest naturally creates effort. When that effort disappears, the message is already clear. And yet, this is the sign men resist accepting the most. Instead of effort, you start getting placeholders. Short replies, delayed responses, conversations that never go anywhere. She answers, but she doesn't engage. She reacts, but she doesn't initiate. You carry the interaction while she simply receives it. This isn't confusion, it's positioning. Modern dating calls it breadcrumbing, giving just enough attention to keep you present, but never enough to move forward. From a power perspective, it's simple. She's keeping you warm while she waits to see if something better shows up. Look at how it plays out. You ask questions. She answers without asking anything back. You suggest plans. She says, maybe, we'll see, or I'll let you know. Specifics disappear. Commitment is postponed. Momentum dies slowly, but deliberately. And the most revealing part? She's not absent. She's active. Just not with you. She's online. She's posting. She's engaging elsewhere. So when men say, she's just busy, what they're really doing is protecting themselves from the truth. Because admitting she's choosing not to invest is uncomfortable. Here's the insight most men never hear. Attention that costs nothing has no value. When you continue giving time, validation, and emotional energy to someone who isn't matching it, you teach her exactly how little effort is required to keep you. You lower your own price by offering yourself at a discount. Women don't respect access that doesn't have conditions, and they don't fear losing what never asks for investment in return. The shift happens when you stop filling the silence, when you end conversations instead of dragging them, when you stop chasing clarity from someone benefiting from your uncertainty. Not as punishment, but as self-respect. A man who requires mutual investment doesn't need to announce it. He demonstrates it by what he no longer gives away freely. And here's the part that changes everything. Most men are afraid to pull back because they think it guarantees loss. But the truth is, staying when there's no investment guarantees something worse. You stay visible, available, and easily replaceable. When you step back, one of two things happens. She steps forward, or she disappears. Both outcomes tell you exactly where you stand, and both save you from continuing to invest in a position you were never meant to hold. There's a reason some men never get breadcrumbed, never get kept warm, never get slowly faded out. It's not because they're louder, smoother, or more aggressive. It's because they move through relationships with a different internal posture. They don't chase interest. They screen for it. When you look at the 5 signs together, a pattern becomes impossible to ignore. The eyes wandering, the voice going flat, the tone turning sharp, the body pulling away, the effort disappearing. None of these are random. They're all responses to one thing: how available you are without requiring anything in return. Women don't test men they fear losing. They test men they believe will stay, no matter how little they give. And this is where everything locks in. The man women respect doesn't demand clarity. He doesn't ask for reassurance. He doesn't argue with mixed signals. He pays attention once and adjusts accordingly, not emotionally, strategically. He doesn't over-explain himself when energy drops. He doesn't negotiate when tone shifts. He doesn't lean in when interest pulls away. Instead, he withdraws access. That doesn't mean he becomes cold or resentful. It means he has standards. It means his time, attention, and emotional presence aren't free samples. They're given in response to reciprocity, not hope. This is the shift from tactics to identity. When you stop asking women to choose you and start observing whether they already are, your entire experience changes. You're no longer reacting to signals, you're filtering for alignment, and women feel that immediately. Because the rarest thing in dating isn't confidence, it's selectiveness. A man who can walk away from low interest without drama becomes the man whose presence carries weight. Not because he's playing games, but because he's no longer playing himself. And once that identity settles in, you don't need to memorize signs anymore. You recognize the pattern early, you respond calmly, and you never find yourself wondering why you keep ending up in the same position. Women don't walk away from men suddenly. They leave quietly, long before the goodbye ever happens. By the time most men realize something is wrong, the decision has already been made. Not in words, but in behavior. Interest didn't vanish overnight. It withdrew in pieces. Attention faded. Tone shifted. Effort disappeared. And the men who get hurt the most are the ones who kept investing, hoping things would go back to how they were. This is the real divide. On one side is the man who keeps giving, keeps adjusting, keeps waiting, until he's drained and confused. On the other is the man who notices early, responds calmly, and refuses to stay where he isn't valued. The difference isn't confidence. It isn't looks. It isn't luck. It's awareness and the willingness to act on it. If you've ever felt like you were doing everything right and still not being chosen, this is why. You weren't failing. You were staying too long after the signs were already there. And the moment you stop doing that, everything changes. Because when you no longer chase interest, you stop rewarding indifference. When you stop rewarding indifference, respect either shows up or the situation removes itself. Both outcomes protect you. If this perspective resonates, subscribe to the channel. This space is for men who want clarity instead of confusion, strength instead of self-betrayal, and standards instead of hope. And if you've recognized one of these signs in your own life, leave a comment. Awareness starts with honesty. Share this with the man who keeps asking himself, why does this keep happening to me? Now you know the answer. She texts you when she's bored. She disappears when you're available. She keeps you close enough to give her attention, but never close enough to choose you. And the worst part? You feel it. That quiet humiliation of being kept instead of wanted. Of being an option, not a priority. Let me be very clear with you. She's not confused. She's not figuring things out. She knows exactly where you stand in her life. The real problem isn't that you're not good enough. It's that you're playing the wrong role in her world, and she's benefiting from it. Today, I'm going to show you 5 ways to stop letting a woman treat you like an option, and more importantly, how to shift your position so this pattern never repeats again. I'm speaking to you as a woman who understands how women think, how attraction actually works, and why certain men get stuck in this painful position without realizing how they got there. This isn't about manipulation, and it's not about turning into someone you're not. It's about changing the power dynamic, quietly, decisively, and permanently. If you've ever felt sidelined, overlooked, or emotionally kept on standby, this conversation is for you. Before we go deeper, make sure you like this video and subscribe. Because what I'm about to break down will change how you see relationships from this point forward. She didn't forget your value. She sorted it. That's the part most men struggle to accept because it sounds colder than the truth they want. But as a woman, I need you to hear this clearly. When a woman treats you like an option, it's not confusion, it's classification. Women constantly organize the men in their lives into emotional categories, not consciously, not maliciously, but instinctively. And when you land in the option category, it's because you serve a function without creating pressure. You regulate her ego. You provide attention when she needs it. You're safe, familiar, and reliably available. That's the first mechanism at play. ego regulation. When her confidence dips, when the man she wants isn't giving her reassurance, she reaches for the person who always answers. Not because she misses him, but because he stabilizes how she feels about herself. The second mechanism is attention backup. In modern dating, attention is currency, and backup attention is insurance. You're the policy she keeps active, so she never has to sit with silence, uncertainty, or rejection for too long. Then there's mate switching. In an environment where options feel endless, women don't choose until they feel compelled to. And nothing kills that urgency faster than a man who is always ready, always waiting, always emotionally on standby. So she keeps you close, but never close enough. You don't challenge her comfort. You don't force a decision. You don't make her risk losing you. And because of that, she never has to choose. This is where most men misread the situation. They think consistency will be rewarded. They believe patience equals maturity. They assume availability signals security. From a female perspective, it often signals the opposite. Because desire doesn't grow where there's no tension. Respect doesn't form where access is guaranteed. And attraction doesn't deepen when a man centers his emotional availability around a woman who hasn't earned it. Here's the uncomfortable truth you need to sit with. A man who is always available is rarely selected. Not because he lacks value, but because he never requires a decision. When you're easy to keep, you're easy not to choose. Number 1. Stop explaining your worth. Most men don't realize this is where they start losing power. Not when she pulls away. Not when she takes longer to reply. But when they feel the urge to explain themselves. You explain because you want to be understood. You explain because you want fairness. You explain because you believe that if she truly saw your intentions, your loyalty, your effort, she would treat you differently. That instinct feels honest. It feels mature. It feels right. From a woman's perspective, it often reads very differently. When a man explains his value, it doesn't sound like clarity. It sounds like insecurity. Not because he lacks worth, but because he's trying to convince someone who hasn't asked to be convinced. Here's what most women experience in those moments. A long message, emotional detail, carefully chosen words meant to create connection. And what registers instead is pressure, emotional weight. A quiet shift in dynamics where the man is now seeking validation instead of embodying certainty. Attraction doesn't respond to monologues. Respect doesn't rise because someone made a good case for themselves. You are not a presentation. You are not a pitch. And your value is not something that needs to be packaged and sold. The moment you start explaining why you matter, you hand over leverage. You move from being observed to being evaluated. And once that happens, the power dynamic tilts away from you. This is why explanations rarely change behavior. They might produce temporary reassurance, longer replies, softer words, but not real investment. Because attention can be given without respect. Comfort can exist without commitment. Every explanation quietly tells her the same thing. I'm still here, even if you don't choose me. And that's the habit you have to break. The shift happens when you stop trying to be understood and start letting your actions speak in silence. When you don't rush to clarify your intentions. When you don't defend your position. When you don't chase emotional resolution. You let your standards do the talking. You let your presence become conditional. You let space replace speeches. And something changes. Not because she suddenly understands you better, but because you finally stop negotiating your worth. A man who knows his value doesn't explain it. He demonstrates it through what he allows and what he quietly withdraws from. When you stop explaining, you don't lose connection. You lose the illusion that talking was ever the solution. Here's where many men relapse, right after they swear they're done explaining. She sends a long message. She replies with warmth. She asks a question that feels personal. And suddenly, hope sneaks back in. From your side, it feels like progress. From hers, it's often just attention management. You need to understand this distinction clearly. Attention is not value, and responsiveness is not investment. Women can give attention without emotional risk. They can engage, flirt, even open up slightly without ever changing how they see you. Because attention costs nothing. Commitment does. Let me give you a scenario I see all the time. She goes quiet for days. You pull back. Then she returns with a thoughtful message, maybe even an apology. Your nervous system relaxes. You think, she gets it now. But what actually happened is simpler. She felt the absence of your attention and reached out to restore it. Not because she chose you, but because she noticed you stepping away. That's the difference most men miss. When a woman values you, she moves toward consistency. When she values your attention, she moves just enough to keep it accessible. Long texts don't mean depth. Fast replies don't mean priority. Emotional tone doesn't equal emotional commitment. What matters is pattern, not moment. If she engages only when you pull back, if warmth appears only when access feels threatened, if closeness never turns into clarity, then you're not being chosen, you're being managed. And here's the truth that stings, but frees you. If someone has to be nudged into recognizing your value, they're not overlooking it. They're opting out of it. They're making a choice that keeps their comfort intact. This is why chasing attention is such a dangerous trap. It conditions you to mistake reaction for intention. It keeps you emotionally invested in crumbs instead of standards. When you stop measuring progress by messages and start measuring it by behavior, the fog lifts. You stop asking, is she interested? And start asking, is this consistent? And once you see that clearly, you don't need reassurance anymore. You need alignment. Because real value isn't proven by how much attention someone gives you. It's revealed by how much access they're willing to earn. Number 2, boundaries are action, not warnings. This is where many men believe they're doing the right thing, while quietly sabotaging themselves. They talk about boundaries. They explain what they won't tolerate. They express disappointment, frustration, even hurt. But when the behavior repeats, nothing changes. From a woman's perspective, that doesn't look like strength. It looks like flexibility disguised as standards. Here's the truth most people avoid. A boundary without consequence is not a boundary. It's a suggestion. And suggestions don't shape behavior. Outcomes do. Women don't respond to what you say you deserve. They respond to what you consistently enforce. Not because they're cruel, but because human beings adapt to the rules of access they're given. This is where fear enters the picture. Men hesitate to enforce boundaries because they're afraid of losing her. Afraid that if they pull back, she'll walk away. Afraid that standing firm will end the connection for good. And sometimes, it will. But what's worse than someone leaving when you draw a line is someone staying while slowly eroding your self-respect. When you allow disrespect once, it sets a precedent. When you allow it twice, it becomes permission. And by the third time, it's the relationship. This is why boundaries must be behavioral, not verbal. When someone disrespects your time, you don't argue about it. You remove your time. When effort drops, you don't negotiate for more. You reduce access. When consistency disappears, you don't chase clarity. You step back into alignment. That's not punishment. That's self-regulation. From a female psychological standpoint, this is where respect either forms or disappears. A man who enforces boundaries without anger, without drama, without explanation, communicates something powerful. My presence is conditional on how I'm treated. And here's the part that surprises many men. The women who are capable of real connection don't test boundaries. They recognize them and adjust. The ones who push, poke, and cross lines are revealing exactly why those boundaries are necessary. This is the shift you need to make. Stop trying to be understood and start being consistent. Because the moment your actions match your standards, the dynamic changes. Either she rises to meet them, or she removes herself. And both outcomes restore your power. A woman who truly respects you will never need to be reminded where the line is. She'll feel it. Number 3, refocus on your goals. This is where the real power shift begins, because nothing pulls a man out of the option category faster than reclaiming his direction. Distraction doesn't ruin men overnight. It erodes them slowly. One unanswered message, one delayed reply, one night spent replaying conversations instead of moving forward. And before you realize it, your emotional state is reacting to her behavior instead of being anchored in your purpose. From the outside, it looks harmless. From the inside, it's devastating. The moment your schedule revolves around her availability, you've already lost leverage. When your mood rises and falls based on whether she texts back, she's no longer just part of your life. She's controlling its rhythm. From a woman's perspective, this is immediately felt. Not logically, but viscerally. A man without direction feels emotionally heavy. He feels absorbent instead of grounded. And no matter how kind or consistent he is, that lack of internal focus quietly lowers his position. Here's what many men don't want to hear. Attraction grows toward motion, toward clarity, toward a man who is building something that doesn't pause for uncertainty. A man with goals doesn't chase alignment. He attracts it. That doesn't mean working non-stop or pretending not to care. It means structuring your life so your time, energy, and attention are invested forward, not upward, towards someone who hasn't committed. Set a target that demands discipline. Create a daily structure that doesn't bend for emotional fluctuation. Replace motivation with consistency. Because motivation fades, but systems don't. When your focus shifts back to your growth, something subtle but powerful happens. You stop monitoring her reactions. You stop waiting. You stop interpreting silence as meaning. And she feels that shift. Not because you announced it, not because you threatened to leave, but because your energy is no longer available on demand. A man who is deeply engaged in his own progress doesn't need to withdraw attention intentionally. His attention becomes scarce naturally. And scarcity, earned through purpose, not manipulation, is what moves you out of the option space entirely. Because a man who is busy building his life doesn't have room to be treated like a backup. Number 4, choose growth over closure. Closure feels mature. It sounds healthy. It convinces you that one last conversation will finally set you free. But from a psychological standpoint, closure is often just attachment, wearing a cleaner mask. Men chase closure because they want their pain to be acknowledged. They want the confusion to make sense. They want to hear something, anything, that confirms the effort they gave wasn't wasted. Here's what I need you to understand from a woman's perspective. When someone consistently treats you like an option, they already gave you their answer. Not with words, but with behavior. And behavior doesn't need clarification. The urge for closure keeps you emotionally tethered. It keeps you replaying moments, rereading messages, imagining explanations that would soften the reality. But explanations don't heal wounds caused by patterns. They just delay acceptance. This is the part that's hard to hear. The person who caused the damage is rarely capable of providing the repair. Not because they're evil, but because they benefited from the dynamic exactly as it was. If she wanted to choose you, she would have. If she valued consistency, she would have shown it. If she feared losing you, you would have felt it. From a female psychological lens, clarity isn't delivered through conversation. It's revealed through distance. Space removes distortion. Absence exposes truth. This is where growth enters. Growth doesn't ask why. Growth asks, what now? When you stop chasing explanations and redirect that energy into yourself, your habits, your structure, your standards, your nervous system starts to recalibrate. You regain emotional balance, not because you understand her better, but because you're no longer orienting your life around her decisions. Distance gives clarity. Growth gives power. And here's the shift most men underestimate. When you choose growth over closure, you exit the loop entirely. You stop waiting for permission to move on. You stop hoping for validation from someone who already demonstrated their priorities. Closure keeps you facing backward. Growth turns you forward. One keeps you tied to her version of events. The other puts you back in control of your own. You don't need her explanation to heal. You need momentum. You need alignment. You need to outgrow the version of yourself that needed answers from someone who never chose you. Because once you grow past the situation, closure becomes irrelevant. Number 5. Walk away without drama. This is the moment most men get wrong, not because they don't want to leave, but because they want to leave and be understood. They want the last word. They want their pain acknowledged. They want her to finally realize what she lost. And that desire quietly hands the power right back to her. From a woman's perspective, drama doesn't signal strength. It signals emotional entanglement. The more explanation, emotion, and intensity you attach to your exit, the more it confirms that she still has access to you. Walking away without drama is different. It's not cold. It's not cruel. It's controlled. This is where ego and self-respect split paths. Ego wants to be seen. Self-respect wants peace. When you disappear calmly, without speeches, without ultimatums, without emotional outbursts, something very specific happens psychologically. She doesn't feel abandoned. She feels cut off. Not from affection, but from access. And that's what creates impact. Women don't feel loss when love disappears. They feel loss when availability does. This is an important distinction. Love can fade slowly. Access disappears instantly. And when it does, the dynamic flips. Not because you planned it, but because you finally stopped offering yourself to a situation that wasn't choosing you. Now let's be clear about something. This is not ghosting. Ghosting is avoidance. Protection is intentional. You're not trying to punish her. You're not trying to teach her a lesson. You're choosing to remove your time and energy from a space where they weren't respected. Silence in this context is not a tactic. It's alignment. When you walk away quietly, you send a message without saying a word. I know my value, and I don't negotiate it. That message lands far deeper than any explanation ever could. And whether she reflects, regrets, or replaces you is no longer your concern. Because the moment you leave without drama, you stop performing for her understanding and start answering to yourself. Here's the truth that closes this chapter. Silence is not a weapon against her. It's loyalty to yourself. And a man who can walk away with calm certainty is no longer an option. He's already moved beyond the game. This is where everything comes together, not as a tactic, but as an identity shift. At this point, you need to understand something crucial. You were never meant to handle her. You were meant to change the version of yourself that tolerated being handled. When a man focuses on fixing the situation, he stays trapped inside it. When he focuses on becoming someone with standards, the situation either rises or disappears. That's the difference between being an option and being a standard. A standard doesn't chase. A standard doesn't explain. A standard doesn't negotiate its worth. When you become that man, the rules change automatically. Not because you demand better treatment, but because you no longer participate in dynamics that require you to ask for it. This is the part that feels uncomfortable at first. Some women will pull away, some connections will fade, and that's not loss, it's filtration. You're no longer available to people who only thrived when you were overgiving, over-explaining, and undervaluing yourself. Here's what most men don't realize. You don't lose her when you step into your standard. You lose the version of the relationship that required you to shrink. And in return, you get something far more valuable. You get yourself back. You stop waking up wondering where you stand. You stop monitoring tone, timing, and signals. You stop needing reassurance to feel steady. Because your identity no longer depends on being chosen. From a woman's perspective, this shift is unmistakable. A man who knows his boundaries, protects his time, and moves with quiet certainty occupies a completely different psychological space. He's not auditioning, he's evaluating. And that's the moment the dynamic flips. Not every woman will qualify for access to this version of you. And that's exactly the point. You were never meant to be universally available. You were meant to be selective, grounded, self-directed. You didn't lose her. You outgrew the role that kept you optional. And once you step into that identity, you don't need to protect your position anymore, because being a standard speaks for itself. If you think back to the beginning of this conversation, it probably started with a familiar feeling, the uncertainty, the waiting, the quiet frustration of giving more than you were getting, being kept close but never chosen, available but never prioritized. And now you can see the truth clearly. You were never lacking value. You were lacking leverage. The moment you stop explaining yourself, the moment you enforce boundaries without emotion, the moment your focus returns to your goals instead of her reactions, the moment you choose growth over answers and silence over drama, you stop being an option. A man with direction doesn't beg to be chosen. A man with standards doesn't argue for respect. A man with discipline doesn't stay where he's tolerated instead of valued. This isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming grounded. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need permission. You don't need to be picked. When your life is built around purpose, structure, and self-respect, the dynamic shifts naturally. Some people won't follow you into that version of yourself. And that's not failure. That's alignment. You didn't lose her. You lost the version of yourself that accepted being optional. And that's the real win. If this message hit closer to home than you expected, make sure you subscribe to this channel. Like this video so it reaches the men who need to hear it. And leave a comment below. Something simple, something honest. Right. I choose self-respect. Because the moment you choose yourself, everything else rearranges around that decision. You're no longer waiting to be chosen. You're choosing who gets access to you. And that's where your power begins. She texts you just enough to keep you hooked, cancels plans with a sweet excuse, and still somehow makes you feel guilty for noticing. Sounds familiar? That's not bad luck. That's strategy. You've fallen into the quietest trap in modern dating, being the man she keeps on standby. But here's the twist. It's not her fault you're stuck there. It's yours, because you've been playing by rules that never favored you. If you've ever wondered why women chase one man but forget another, this is your wake-up call. In the next few minutes, I'll give you the 7 psychological steps that make a woman stop taking you for granted and start fighting for your attention. If you've ever been that man waiting for her text, wondering what changed, today is the day you stop waiting and start taking control. Before we move on, hit subscribe, like, and write one simple line in the comments. I'm done being an option. Say it out loud if you have to. That's your first step toward emotional reset. Because what comes next isn't theory. It's the start of your rebuild. And once you understand this first truth, everything about how you show up with women will start to shift. Number 1, read the room. If you've ever caught yourself waiting for her reply that never comes, replaying the same unanswered message on your phone, it's not bad luck. It's a pattern. You're being quietly downgraded. She's not saying it out loud, but every delay, every cancelled plan, every sorry, got busy is a silent signal. You're not the priority, you're the placeholder. When a woman's interest fades, she doesn't always leave. Sometimes she keeps you around just enough to feel wanted, without ever giving back the same energy. That's what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement. It's when rewards are given inconsistently, just enough to keep you hooked, craving the next moment of affection. It's not love, it's emotional conditioning. The human brain reacts to uncertainty like a drug. Every time she disappears, then suddenly sends a "Hey stranger" text, dopamine spikes. You confuse that high with connection, when really it's dependency. You start chasing that rush, not her, but the illusion of what you thought she felt. And that's how good men stay stuck. Here's the truth most men don't want to face. She doesn't keep you around because she needs you. She keeps you around because she can. Because you haven't shown her that your absence costs something. You're available, predictable, and replaceable. The perfect emotional safety net. And let's be honest, you've probably told yourself she's just busy, or that she'll come around. That's not optimism, that's denial. Every time you excuse her behavior, you teach her it's acceptable. Every time you stay, you tell her you'll tolerate being plan B. Reading the room isn't about being bitter or playing hard to get, it's about clarity. It's the moment you stop negotiating your worth with someone who's already discounted it. So ask yourself, is she making space for you or just keeping you in storage? If she's treating you like a background character in her story, then it's time you stop auditioning for a lead role. Number 2, the law of reciprocity. In every connection, romantic, professional, or social, value only exists when energy flows both ways. The moment you start pouring more than you receive, the balance breaks and respect collapses. Most men don't realize it until it's too late. When you keep showing up for someone who doesn't reciprocate, you stop being desirable and start being convenient. Reciprocity isn't some poetic concept, it's behavioral economics. When she gives less and still gets your full attention, her brain registers one thing. Your effort has no price. She learns that she doesn't need to try. She can give you crumbs and still get a feast of validation in return. That's not attraction. That's conditioning her to undervalue you. Think about the last time you texted first, apologized first, adjusted your schedule first, all while she gave the bare minimum. That's not generosity. That's self-neglect, dressed as kindness. Every time you reach out first, you're rewarding low effort. Every time you accept the imbalance, you're teaching her how little it takes to keep you around. If love is a currency, stop trading gold for her breadcrumbs. Your attention, time, and emotional energy are assets, not donations. The more you give them away without a return, the faster they lose their worth. Here's what psychology says. People mirror behavior that benefits them. When you stop over-investing, one of two things will happen. She'll either step up to match your energy, or she'll drift away because the free supply is gone. Either way, you win. You regain clarity. Pulling back isn't about punishment, it's about recalibration. You're not withdrawing love, you're re-establishing value. When your availability stops being guaranteed, she's forced to re-evaluate what your presence actually means. That's the shift. Remember this truth. Every time you reward low effort, you're reinforcing the behavior that made you feel small in the first place. Reciprocity isn't about ego. It's about emotional economy. When both sides invest fairly, respect compounds. When one side overpays, connection dies in debt. So from now on, don't beg for balance. Create it. Number 3, you come first. Here's something most men never realize until they've already lost themselves. The moment you start orbiting around her, you begin to fade from her sight. A man who builds his world around a woman eventually becomes invisible in it. You stop being magnetic and start being manageable. And once you're manageable, you're forgettable. Women aren't drawn to men who chase them. They're drawn to men who chase purpose. There's a psychological principle behind it: self-orbit attraction. When a man radiates direction, focus, and internal gravity, people naturally align around him. But when he gives up that center, when his emotional balance depends on her attention, the polarity collapses. You stop being a man she's intrigued by and start being one she controls. Think of it like this: she's not the sun, and you're not a planet in her orbit. You are your own gravity. Every goal you chase, every boundary you set, every decision you make, those are the elements that create your field. And that field either pulls people in or repels those who don't belong there. You want her to notice you again. Don't text more. Don't prove harder. Build stronger. Invest in your health, your ambition, your mission. Not for her, but because those things remind you of who you are when you're not seeking approval. That energy, the quiet, unbothered certainty, is what creates attraction. It signals value without words. Women subconsciously read social proof. When they sense that your world is full, that you're fulfilled, respected, desired, they feel an instinctive pull. It's not manipulation. It's magnetism. The same way people gather around a fire, not because the fire asks them to, but because it burns on its own. So stop orbiting her. Reclaim your gravity. You were never meant to revolve around someone's moods or schedules. The moment you step back into your own axis, that's when she notices the space you've created and the silence that used to belong to her. Because here's the paradox of attraction. The second she realizes you're fulfilled without her, that's when she starts chasing your attention. Number 4, the novelty factor. Predictability kills desire, not instantly, but slowly, like oxygen leaving a room. When a woman already knows what you'll say, when you'll reply, and how you'll react, you stop being a person she's drawn to and start being a pattern she's memorized. And the human brain doesn't crave what it already understands. It craves surprise. Psychologists call it habituation. It means the more familiar a stimulus becomes, the weaker the emotional response. The same joke stops being funny. The same touch stops feeling electric. The same conversation stops being exciting. You're not boring. You've just become predictable. Here's the part most men don't get. She's not losing interest because you did something wrong. She's losing interest because she can see your next move before you make it. When every reply comes instantly, every invitation feels expected, and every action follows a script, there's no tension left to pull her in. You don't have to disappear or play games. What you need is pattern disruption. Create moments that make her pause. Moments where she can't quite read you. Take a few hours before replying. End a conversation on your own terms. Try something new, unexpected, and unannounced. Do it not to provoke her, but to remind yourself that your time and energy have rhythm, not permanence. A man who is easy to read is easy to forget, but a man who carries an element of mystery, not secrecy, but depth, activates a different part of her brain. Dopamine spikes when the outcome is uncertain. She starts checking your profile, rereading messages, replaying your tone in her head. You've stopped being a script and become a story again. Mystery isn't manipulation. It's magnetic tension. It's the subtle art of keeping her curious, keeping her invested. The more she wonders, the more she feels. And that curiosity fuels attraction far stronger than validation ever could. So never let her feel like she solved you. Be the man she's still trying to figure out, not the one she's already defined. Predictability makes her comfortable. Unpredictability makes her intrigued. And between comfort and curiosity, desire will always choose curiosity. Number 5. Be the prize. The more accessible something is, the less it's valued. That's not cynicism. That's psychology. Scarcity bias, a proven behavioral truth, states that people assign higher worth to what feels limited. So when your time, attention, and emotional energy are always available, they stop being meaningful. You become a constant, and constants are invisible. When a woman knows she can reach you anytime, she stops reaching with intention. When she knows you'll answer immediately, she stops crafting her words carefully. When she knows you'll always forgive, she stops fearing the loss. That's not confidence on her part. It's conditioning on yours. Being the prize doesn't mean acting superior. It means understanding that your value is determined by how selectively you share yourself. You don't need to announce it. You simply adjust your behavior. You reply when you actually have the time. You share less, not because you're hiding, but because you've learned the difference between intimacy and exposure. A treasure loses its value when it's left in the open. What's rare feels sacred. What's constant feels common. When you become emotionally scarce, when you stop broadcasting your availability, she begins to feel your absence. And the human brain reacts to absence with curiosity, even anxiety. That's loss aversion in motion. We feel the pain of losing something twice as strong as the pleasure of gaining it. So when she senses that your attention is no longer guaranteed, her instincts awaken. She replays your last conversation. She starts to wonder if someone else has your focus now. It's not about jealousy. It's about recalibration. She's realizing your presence had a weight, and she took it for granted. The less she knows about what's next, the more she'll want to find out. That's not playing games. That's allowing space for tension to breathe. You're not punishing her with silence. You're reminding her that your energy is earned, not entitled. When your time and attention become rare, her interest becomes real. Because attraction isn't built on abundance, it's built on anticipation. And when you finally give her your focus again, it won't feel casual. It'll feel like a reward. Number 6, draw the line. Respect doesn't come from what you tolerate. It comes from what you refuse to. Every relationship, whether romantic or not, is a negotiation of boundaries, the invisible lines that teach others how to treat you. When those lines blur, connection turns into convenience, and the person who refuses to set standards becomes the one everyone tests. Let's be clear. Boundaries aren't ultimatums. They're not threats, demands, or emotional walls. They're quiet declarations of self-worth. When you draw the line, you're not saying, "Don't cross me." You're saying, "This is the level of access my peace requires." It's not about control. It's about clarity. Take something simple. She cancels plans for the 3rd time. Most men respond emotionally. They argue, chase, or beg. But strength isn't in the reaction. It's in the restraint. Silence, distance, and consistency communicate far more than confrontation ever will. When your energy stops being reactive, your absence starts speaking louder than your words. Psychologists call it psychological reactance. When someone senses they're losing freedom, they instinctively desire what's slipping away. So when you withdraw calmly, not out of anger, but out of self-respect, she starts to feel that shift. You're no longer predictable. You're no longer waiting. You've drawn a line. And suddenly, she has to decide if she's willing to step back across it. A man without boundaries is like a door that never closes. Easy to enter, easier to leave. Every time you let someone cross your limits without consequence, you're not being kind. You're being complicit in your own neglect. Here's the truth most men never learn. Consistency builds credibility. When your boundaries stay firm, your presence starts to mean something again. People, including her, respect what they can't manipulate. So next time she pushes, don't explain your worth. Show it. Don't argue your standards. Enforce them quietly. The power isn't in telling her what you'll no longer accept. It's in showing her that you mean it. When she knows your standards, she'll rise to meet them or step aside. Either outcome protects your peace. And that's how boundaries stop being rules and start becoming respect. 7. Show her what she could lose. Every man wants to be wanted, but few understand the difference between being wanted and being needed. The first is temporary, based on attention, novelty, or charm. The second is deeper, built on the kind of value that can't be replicated once it's gone. Irreplaceability isn't about perfection, it's about presence. It's about becoming the man whose absence echoes louder than his words ever did. So how do you reach that point? By becoming whole, not dependent, not performative, but anchored. Irreplaceable men share 3 traits: emotional depth, stability, and vision. They don't chase connection, they create gravity. They bring clarity to chaos, calm to intensity, and purpose to uncertainty. That's what makes a woman pause before she walks away. Because deep down she knows she may find someone new, but she won't find this. When you offer emotional depth, you give her safety. When you embody stability, you become her peace. And when you have vision, when you're building something greater than the relationship itself, you become her inspiration. Those 3 things form the foundation of masculine energy that can't be duplicated. Every woman remembers the man who made her feel safe and slightly scared to lose him. Not because he threatened to leave, but because his presence carried weight. He didn't need to prove his worth. He lived it. His silence spoke louder than any declaration. His focus made her realize she was part of something rare. You don't win her by proving you're the best. You win her by being the one she can't forget. The one who touched her life with certainty, not need. When you operate from abundance, not scarcity, you stop competing with other men entirely. You exist in a category of your own. And here's the paradox of power. The moment she realizes losing you would mean losing her balance, that's when you've become the priority. Because true influence doesn't come from chasing attention. It comes from embodying value so solid that attention chases you. That's the man she doesn't play games with. That's the man she rethinks everything for. And that's the man you're becoming. You started this video wondering why she treats you like an option. Why you feel like the man she calls when she's bored, but forgets when she's busy. Now you know the truth. It was never just about her choices. It was about your boundaries, your energy, and what you taught her to expect. Because in every relationship, spoken or not, you're teaching people how to value you. Every unanswered message you accept, every cancelled plan you forgive without consequence, every time you overextend to prove your worth, you write the script of how you'll be treated. And the good news? You can rewrite it anytime. You don't need to chase, convince, or negotiate for attention. You only need to remember this. You teach people how to value you by the way you value yourself. When you start showing up like a man who knows his worth, you won't have to demand respect. It will arrive uninvited. Look back at where you began, the guy who waited for her texts, who accepted uncertainty as affection. That man doesn't exist anymore. You've learned to read the room, balance reciprocity, and reclaim your gravity. You've discovered that mystery isn't manipulation, it's magnetic. You've drawn lines that protect your peace and built presence that commands attention. Now, you're not the guy she calls when she's bored. You're the man she can't stop thinking about. The one whose silence says more than his words ever could. The one whose absence feels heavier than his presence ever did. And remember this, when you know your worth, silence becomes your weapon, distance becomes your language, and scarcity becomes your power. You're not being cold, you're being clear. If this message hit you hard, it's because you needed to hear it. Don't just listen to it, live it, walk with it. Let it reshape the way you show up in every connection you have. Subscribe to this channel because here we don't chase approval. We study psychology, master energy, and reclaim emotional power. A woman can love you and still not respect you. Let that sink in. She can sleep with you, commit to you, build a life with you, and still, deep down, not see you as the man to follow. That's the part no one warns men about. Most men think respect comes automatically with time, effort, and loyalty. It doesn't. Respect is a ranking, and women reveal it through behavior, not words. There are 6 unmistakable things women only do for men they truly respect. They don't negotiate them, they don't fake them, and they don't give them out of kindness. If you've ever felt like her energy shifted, like your voice carries less weight than it used to, this isn't about fixing her mood. It's about understanding the 6 signals that tell you exactly where you stand before it's too late. Attraction is easy. It's emotional. It's reactive. Respect is rare, and it's earned on a completely different level. A woman can sleep with you. She can love you. She can stay in a relationship with you for years, and still not respect you. That's the part most men don't want to hear, because they confuse presence with position. Attraction is how she feels about you. Respect is how she ranks you. When attraction is high but respect is low, you don't become her partner. You become her emotional safety net. The man she leans on, vents to, confides in, but doesn't follow. You're there to support her feelings, not shape the direction. And that's where men get stuck. They think consistency, patience, and understanding will eventually earn authority. It doesn't. It earns comfort. Without respect, you're not leading the relationship. You're reacting inside it. You adjust. You explain. You accommodate. And slowly, without a single argument, your position drops. Here's the truth most men learn too late. A woman doesn't follow the man she likes. She follows the man she respects. And everything you're about to hear next flows from that one rule. Number 1, she listens and she actually adjusts. Most women are very good at talking. They can express emotions, explain feelings, unpack experiences for hours. But listening, real listening, that's selective. Here's the difference most men miss. A woman can hear you without taking you seriously. She can nod, agree, even apologize, and change nothing. That's not misunderstanding. That's your words landing with no weight. When a woman truly respects you, something subtle but powerful shifts. She doesn't interrupt. She doesn't rush to defend herself. She doesn't twist your point into a debate. She goes quiet, not cold, focused. Because in her mind, what you're saying isn't noise. It's guidance. You bring something up once, and it sticks. You express a boundary, and she adjusts without needing reminders. You correct a behavior, and you don't get resistance, excuses, or emotional gymnastics. Why? Because respect changes how her brain categorizes your voice. It moves you from the emotional input box into the directional authority box. Your words stop being opinions and start becoming reference points. Now look at the opposite scenario. If you constantly have to repeat yourself, if every concern turns into a long explanation, if she agrees in the moment but nothing ever changes, you're not leading. You're background noise, and no woman respects background noise. This is where a lot of good men lose their footing. They think patience will eventually translate into authority, so they soften their tone. They over-explain. They try to sound more understanding, more careful, more accommodating. All that does is teach her that your words don't require action. A woman doesn't adjust for a man she sees as equal. She adjusts for a man she sees as above the emotional chaos, someone whose perspective actually matters. And notice this. When respect is real, adjustment doesn't come with attitude. There's no sighing, no eye-rolling, no passive resistance. She doesn't feel diminished by aligning with you. She feels anchored. because in her mind, ignoring you would feel like being out of sync with something solid. Here's the line every man needs to sit with. No woman respects a man she can ignore. If your words don't move her behavior, your position is already compromised. Number 2, she watches her mouth around you. If you want to know how a woman truly sees you, don't start with her actions. Start with her tone. Because language is never accidental. It's a ranking system. Sarcasm, slick comments, little jokes at your expense, backhanded remarks disguised as just playing. That's not personality. That's not humor. And it's definitely not comfort. That's power testing. When a woman doesn't respect a man, she speaks to him the way she speaks to people she feels above. She pushes, she pokes, she sees what she can get away with, not consciously, but instinctively. Every sarcastic comment is a quiet question. How much can I lower you without consequences? Now watch what happens when respect is present. That edge disappears. Not because she's afraid of you, but because her nervous system doesn't register you as someone she can casually run over. The filter turns on automatically. She chooses her words. She doesn't mock you in front of others. She doesn't take small verbal shots to feel bigger. And here's the part men misunderstand. She's not walking on eggshells. She's calibrating. Women don't speak recklessly to men they can't afford to disrespect. The same way you don't joke carelessly with someone whose authority you recognize, she doesn't casually diminish a man she sees as solid. Pay attention to patterns. Does she talk to you like one of her girlfriends? Does she tease you the same way she teases men she doesn't take seriously? Does she correct you publicly, challenge you sarcastically, or laugh at you instead of with you? Those aren't quirks. They're signals. A woman who respects you protects your position, especially with her words. She understands, even if she can't articulate it, that how she speaks to you shapes how she feels about you. Disrespect doesn't start with betrayal. It starts with tone. And once she gets comfortable lowering you verbally, the internal hierarchy is already set. This is why men who tolerate disrespectful language slowly lose authority. Every ignored comment teaches her that your boundaries are negotiable. Every forced laugh trains her nervous system to rank you lower. Here's the truth most men avoid. How she speaks to you is how she ranks you. If her mouth has no filter around you, it's because her respect already slipped or never existed in the first place. Number 3, she changes her behavior without the attitude. There's a difference most men don't catch at first. And by the time they do, the damage is already done. It's the difference between hearing you and adjusting for you. A woman can listen to your concern and still disrespect you. You know that moment. You bring something up calmly, clearly. And she responds with, "That's just how I am." You're being too sensitive. Every woman does that. That's not honesty. That's defense. When a woman doesn't respect a man, every request feels like an attack on her identity. She has to protect herself. She has to explain. She has to justify. And suddenly, a simple boundary turns into a full-blown negotiation. But when respect is real, the response looks very different. She doesn't argue. She doesn't dramatize it. She doesn't turn it into a referendum on her personality. She adjusts, quietly, not because she's afraid of losing you, but because being out of alignment with you feels wrong. In her internal world, your standards matter. Your expectations carry weight. So correction doesn't trigger her ego. It triggers calibration. This is what men misunderstand about leadership in relationships. Leadership doesn't require force. It requires position. When a woman sees you as a leader, adjusting her behavior doesn't feel like submission. It feels like order, like sinking herself to something stable. That's why there's no attitude attached to it. No size. No passive-aggressive compliance. No emotional tax afterward. She doesn't need convincing. She doesn't need follow-ups. She doesn't need long explanations about why it matters to you. She just does better. Now contrast that with the man who constantly has to manage her reactions, who walks on eggshells just to avoid conflict, who avoids bringing things up because it always turns into an argument. That man isn't leading. He's negotiating from below. And here's the hard line most men need to hear. If every correction turns into a fight, you're not leading. A woman who respects you doesn't challenge your standards. She aligns with them, because respect isn't loud, it's efficient. Number 4. She speaks about you with pride when you're not there. Respect reveals itself most clearly in your absence, not when you're sitting across from her, not when you're doing things for her, but when your name comes up and you're not in the room to hear it. This is where a lot of men get blindsided. A woman can be affectionate in private and still quietly diminish you in public. She might avoid mentioning you, downplay what you do, shrug when someone asks about you, or worse, justify being with you, as if she needs to explain her choice. That's not shyness. That's hesitation. When a woman respects a man, she doesn't hide him. She doesn't minimize him. She doesn't detach her identity from his presence. Her tone changes when she talks about you. There's weight behind it. She quotes you. She defends you. She references your perspective even when you're not there. And here's why this matters psychologically. Women are deeply aware of social positioning. Attaching themselves to a man, publicly, is a statement. It signals value, direction, and status. So they're selective. They don't put their name next to someone who lowers their perceived position. When she speaks about you with pride, it means she sees you as an extension of her standards. You're not just the man she sleeps with. You're the man she measures other men against. Now flip that. If she avoids talking about you, if she keeps your relationship vague, if she downplays your role in her life, that's not privacy. That's distance. It means, on some level, she hasn't fully aligned herself with you. And alignment is impossible without respect. This is why men who lack respect feel invisible outside the relationship. They exist in a private bubble, but not in her broader world. She keeps options open. She keeps narratives flexible. A woman who respects you doesn't do that. She stands on the choice she made. Here's the line men need to stop ignoring. If she hides you, she doesn't respect you. Respect makes a woman proud to be associated with you, not because of what you provide, but because of who you are. Number 5. She seeks your input before making major decisions. There's a quiet but decisive shift that happens when a woman truly respects a man. She stops acting first and starts checking in. Attraction makes her want your attention. Respect makes her want your direction. When a woman sees you as a man with sound judgment, she naturally brings you into her decision-making process. Not because she needs permission, but because your perspective carries authority in her mind. She asks what you think before reacting emotionally. She pauses before committing to something big. She wants to know how you see the situation. That's not dependence. That's recognition. This is where many men get confused and accidentally talk themselves out of their position. They say things like, "Just do whatever makes you happy," thinking it sounds supportive. What it actually does is remove their role from the equation. A woman doesn't seek input from a man she sees as optional. When she respects you, your opinion becomes a stabilizer. It grounds her. She feels safer making decisions when she's aligned with your judgment. That's influence, not control. Now look at the opposite pattern. She makes major moves without mentioning them. She informs you after the fact. She treats your reaction as an inconvenience instead of a consideration. That dynamic tells you everything. You're not part of her internal compass. You're just someone who needs to be notified. And that's a dangerous downgrade. Men often tolerate this because they don't want to seem insecure or controlling. But leadership isn't about force. It's about being included before the decision is made. A woman who respects you doesn't fear your perspective. She values it. She knows you see angles she might miss when emotions run high. And here's the distinction every man needs to understand. Being included is respect. Being informed is not. If she only tells you after everything is already set in motion, your role has already been reduced. Respect invites your voice into the process, not as a courtesy, but as a necessity. Number 6, she stops the drama and starts bringing you peace. Drama is not random. It's not just how women are. And it's definitely not a sign of passion. Drama is a power test. When a woman doesn't respect a man, she creates emotional friction to see how grounded he really is. She pulls away to provoke a reaction. She starts arguments over nothing. She stirs tension just to feel the upper hand, not maliciously, instinctively. Chaos gives her control when stability doesn't. But when a woman meets a man she genuinely respects, something fundamental changes. She calms down. Not because she's bored, not because she's losing interest, but because her nervous system no longer feels the need to challenge him. A man who is internally solid doesn't react emotionally to tests. He doesn't chase. He doesn't over-explain. He doesn't fight for dominance. And because he can't be shaken, there's nothing to gain from creating turbulence. That's when peace appears. She stops manufacturing problems. She stops pushing buttons. She stops trying to win. Instead, she starts contributing. She becomes softer, not weaker. Cooperative, not submissive. She brings stability into your life because she senses that you are already stable without her. This is the moment many men misread. They think, she's less dramatic. Maybe she's losing interest. No, she's losing the need to test. A woman only fights for control when she doesn't trust the man next to her to hold it. Once she respects you, she relaxes into alignment. She doesn't want to compete with you. She wants to complement you. And that's the key distinction. She no longer wants to challenge you. She wants to support you. Here's the truth most men never connect. Peace is not what a woman gives the man she's comfortable with. Peace is what she gives the man she can't shake. If your presence quiets her chaos instead of feeding it, respect has already taken root. And when a woman brings you peace, it's because she stopped trying to take power from you and started trusting you with it. What these 6 behaviors have in common isn't technique. They're not tricks you perform. They're not things you demand. They're responses. Each one is a reaction to the same underlying reality, position. When a woman truly respects a man, she naturally aligns with him. She listens because his words matter. She watches her tone because his position is solid. She adjusts without attitude because his standards feel legitimate. She speaks about him with pride because being connected to him elevates her. She seeks his input because his judgment is trusted. She brings peace because there's no need to fight for control. None of this comes from asking for it. All of it comes from who you are being. That's the part most men try to skip. They want the behaviors without the foundation, the obedience without the authority, the alignment without the leadership. And when they don't get it, they assume something is wrong with women. It isn't. Women don't withhold respect to punish men. They respond to what they perceive. And perception is shaped by consistency, boundaries, self-command, and direction, not by overgiving or emotional labor. When respect is present, power struggles disappear. She stops negotiating the hierarchy. She stops testing limits. She settles into alignment because it feels right, not because she's forced. Here's the shift every man has to make. You don't ask for respect. You don't negotiate for it. You become the kind of man it attaches itself to. These 6 behaviors aren't goals. They're evidence. And if they're missing, the answer isn't to chase harder. It's to look honestly at the position you're holding. If there's one truth you need to walk away with, it's this. Women don't treat good men badly. They just don't follow men they don't respect. Most men never get clarity on that distinction. They assume effort equals authority. That loyalty should automatically earn leadership. And when it doesn't, they internalize the wrong lesson. They try harder, give more, explain themselves deeper. That's how men slowly erase their own position. If you didn't recognize yourself in those 6 behaviors, don't panic and don't blame her. A woman doesn't wake up one day deciding to downgrade a man. She responds to the role he's been holding all along. Respect doesn't come from chasing approval. It doesn't come from emotional availability without backbone. And it never comes from bargaining your standards away just to keep the peace. A man who is respected doesn't beg to be heard. He isn't afraid to be disagreed with, and he doesn't confuse being chosen with being followed. When you stop overgiving, stop explaining, stop reacting, something shifts. Not because you're trying to control her, but because you're finally controlling yourself. That's when respect has room to grow. So if this hit close to home, don't numb it. Use it. Subscribe if you're done being the man women get comfortable lowering. Comment if you've ever realized, too late, that your position slipped quietly. And share this with a man who's still being chosen, but never truly followed. Because the moment a woman truly respects you, she can't unsee it. And neither can you. You had the date. You did everything right. The conversation flowed. The chemistry was there. The sex was good. She left your place smiling. And then, silence. No texts, no calls, no explanation. Here's the uncomfortable truth most men don't want to hear. If sex were enough, she wouldn't disappear after giving you her body. Women can sleep with a man and still feel nothing pulling them back. Attraction didn't fail you. Connection did. And no, I'm not talking about romance. Not money. Not muscles. There's one specific trigger in the female brain that hits deeper than lust. When you activate it, she doesn't just want you, she bonds to you. Not by choice, by biology. Sex excites her body. This rewires her nervous system. I'm telling you this as a woman who understands exactly how women attach and why they walk away from men who thought they did everything right. This isn't about simping, chasing, or emotional theatric. It's about learning how to hold emotional frame without losing your edge. If you want content that actually gives you leverage instead of illusions, hit like and subscribe now. This isn't entertainment. This is understanding the game, so you're no longer playing it blind. Let's break down what's really happening and why it changes everything. You were taught a very specific lie about attraction. Maybe not directly, maybe not in words, but through movies, social media, dating advice, and other men who were just as confused as you. Look better. Make more money. Be more confident. Be more impressive. And if you stack enough of those traits together, a woman will stay. Here's the part no one says out loud. Most men who get left behind weren't unattractive. They weren't awkward. They didn't mess it up in the bedroom. In fact, many of them did everything right on paper. They got the date, they got the chemistry, they got the sex, and then they got nothing. Because getting a woman's body has never been the real challenge. Keeping a place in her emotional world is. That's the gap most men don't see until it hurts. Women don't walk away because sex was bad. They walk away because nothing lingered after it was over. No imprint, no emotional echo, no reason for her nervous system to pull her back toward you when you're not there. You can excite her for a night and still be forgettable by morning. That's the brutal distinction. Attraction isn't measured by how intense the moment was. It's measured by what remains when the moment ends. And most men leave no residue behind. They leave no emotional signal strong enough to compete with her independence, her options, her life. So she doesn't stay. She doesn't chase. She doesn't explain. She simply moves on. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. The men who lose women this way usually believe they were exciting, fun, confident, even dominant. They confuse stimulation with impact. They think desire equals attachment. It doesn't. A woman can desire you and still feel nothing tying her to you. She can enjoy you and still feel safer walking away than staying connected. That's why this feels so confusing from the male side. You felt something happen. She didn't feel something settle. And that difference changes everything. She didn't leave because you weren't exciting. She left because nothing in her stayed with you. To understand why excitement fades but attachment lingers, you have to stop thinking in terms of romance and start thinking in terms of chemistry. Not metaphorical chemistry, actual brain chemistry. Most of what men call attraction runs on dopamine. Dopamine is the hit, the rush, the spike. It's released through novelty, flirting, sexual tension, sex itself. It's what makes your heart race and your focus narrow. And dopamine is powerful, but it's temporary. High, crash, gone. That's why lust burns hot and fast. Dopamine doesn't bond. It motivates. It pushes someone to chase a feeling, not a person. Once the feeling fades, the pull fades with it. No matter how intense the night was, dopamine doesn't give her a reason to return when the stimulation is over. Oxytocin works differently. Oxytocin is released when a woman feels emotionally safe, when she feels seen instead of evaluated, when her nervous system relaxes around you rather than staying alert. It's the same hormone involved in long-term bonding, trust, and attachment. It's what turns "this was fun" into "this feels right." And here's the part most men miss. Oxytocin doesn't feel dramatic. It feels calming, grounding, familiar. It doesn't spike. It settles. When oxytocin is activated, her body starts associating you with safety and regulation. Not excitement alone, but relief. Not stimulation, but comfort. Her system begins to register you as someone she can lower her guard around. That's when attachment starts forming. She doesn't just like you, her body remembers you. This is why a woman can walk away from incredible sex without looking back, and still find herself thinking about a man who didn't try to impress her at all. One gave her dopamine, the other gave her oxytocin. Dopamine excites her. Oxytocin imprints you, and imprinting isn't a conscious choice. It's not something she decides logically. It happens beneath thought, beneath language, beneath intention. Her nervous system makes the call long before her mind explains it. So when men say, "I don't understand, the chemistry was insane," they're usually describing dopamine. And when women say, "I don't know why, I just feel comfortable with him," they're describing oxytocin. One fades quickly. The other rewires attachment. Once you understand that difference, a lot of confusion disappears. And you start to see why excitement alone never makes a woman stay, but safety makes her bond. You've probably lived this one. The date went well. The vibe felt easy. The sex wasn't awkward. It was good. She laughed. She stayed the night. She kissed you goodbye. And then the next morning, nothing. No good morning, no follow-up, no slow fade, just silence. From the male side, this feels brutal because your mind is replaying the highlights. You're thinking about the connection, the intimacy, the way she responded to you. But while you're replaying the night, she's already emotionally gone. Not because she's cold, not because she's heartless, and not because you did something wrong. She disappeared because nothing anchored her to stay. Sex, by itself, doesn't create meaning. It creates sensation. And sensation fades fast once the body returns to baseline. If there's no emotional signal beneath the physical experience, her nervous system has no reason to pull her back toward you. So when the stimulation ends, so does the attachment. This is where most men misread what happened. They assume ghosting is a judgment of their performance. It isn't. It's a lack of emotional gravity. You didn't repel her. You simply didn't register deeply enough to matter. Think about it this way. Her body experienced pleasure, but her system never relaxed. She enjoyed the moment, but she never felt safe enough to settle. And without that sense of settling, there's no internal pull to reconnect. That's why explanations never come. From her side, there's nothing to explain. No unresolved tension. No emotional thread left hanging. The night closed cleanly. And here's the hard truth men avoid. Women don't stay because something felt good. They stay because something felt grounding. Because being with you lowered their internal noise instead of adding to it. If nothing in her nervous system softened around you, she won't return. No matter how confident you were. No matter how good the sex was. No matter how right everything seemed. Ghosting isn't rejection. It's absence of attachment. And until you understand that distinction, this pattern will keep repeating itself. With different women, same ending. Let me show you how this plays out in real life, because theory only clicks once you see the contrast. Picture the first man. On paper, he's everything most men think women want. Tall, well-dressed, successful. He plans impressive dates, orders confidently, speaks with certainty. From the outside, he looks like a win. Friends would tell her she's lucky. Other men would assume he has it handled. And yet, something is missing. Every conversation stays on the surface. When she shares something personal, he responds correctly, but not emotionally. He hears her words, but nothing in him registers how she feels. There's no judgment, but there's also no depth, no resonance, no sense that she's actually being received. Being with him feels polished and strangely empty. Now contrast that with the second man. He isn't flawless. He's not flashy. He doesn't overwhelm the room when he walks in. But when she talks, he's present. Not performative. Not trying to fix or impress. He notices the shift in her tone. He asks questions that aren't scripted. When she jokes darkly, he doesn't correct her. He understands her humor. And when she opens up emotionally, he doesn't rush to solve it or change the subject. He stays, calm, grounded, unthreatened by her feelings. Something subtle happens here. Around him, her nervous system slows down. She doesn't feel evaluated. She doesn't feel like she has to maintain an image. She can drop the mask without being punished for it. And that sense of permission, that feeling of being emotionally seen without being managed, changes how her body responds. This is where attachment forms, not because he's better on paper, but because being with him feels regulating. Over time, she finds herself thinking about him more, missing his presence, not his validation, wanting to share things with him before anyone else, and she might not even be able to explain why. From the outside, it looks irrational. From the inside, it feels inevitable. She didn't feel more attracted in the usual sense. She felt at home, and that feeling, comfort without boredom, safety without control, is rare. When a woman finds it, her system doesn't let go easily. That's why one man gets replaced quickly, while the other becomes the standard she compares everyone else to. This is where most men misunderstand what emotional safety really is. They hear the word safe and immediately think weak, passive, predictable, nice in a way that kills desire, so they push against it. They stay guarded, detached, overly dominant, because no man wants to be the guy she feels comfortable with, but doesn't want. But emotional safety has nothing to do with softness. It's about steadiness. A man who creates emotional safety isn't chasing approval. He isn't over-explaining himself. He isn't trying to perform masculinity or prove his value. He's grounded in who he is, and that groundedness transmits something powerful to a woman's nervous system. Calm. When you're emotionally solid, she doesn't feel rushed. She doesn't feel tested. She doesn't feel like one wrong word will change your mood or threaten your interest. That predictability at the emotional level, not the behavioral one, is what allows her to relax. And when she relaxes, she opens. This is where the power shift happens. A man who provides emotional safety sets the pace. He doesn't need to push intimacy forward because her system begins to move toward him naturally. She shares more. She invests more. She becomes more responsive, not because he demands it, but because being with him feels regulating instead of draining. This kind of presence is rare. Most men are either emotionally distant or emotionally needy. One makes her feel unseen. The other makes her feel responsible. Neither creates safety. But the man who can stay present without grasping, who can listen without fixing, lead without controlling, becomes someone her body trusts. And trust is leverage. Not the manipulative kind, the biological kind. Because once a woman associates you with emotional stability, she stops scanning for exits. She stops bracing herself. She stops keeping one foot out the door. Her defenses lower, not because she's convinced, but because her system no longer feels the need to protect her. That's when attachment deepens. Not through intensity, through consistency. The man who makes her feel safe doesn't rush the connection. He controls the pace by not needing the outcome. And that quiet confidence, that lack of urgency, is what gives him influence without effort. The man who makes her feel safe controls the pace. Here's where a lot of men go wrong after hearing all this. They hear emotional connection and immediately swing to the other extreme. They start oversharing, over-explaining, unloading their past wounds like intimacy is built through confession alone. They mistake vulnerability for depth and intensity for closeness. And it backfires. Emotional connection is not emotional dumping. Telling her everything you've been through doesn't make her feel closer to you. It often makes her feel responsible for you. And responsibility is the fastest way to kill attraction. When a man trauma dumps early, texts constantly for reassurance, or needs her to regulate his emotions, her system doesn't relax. It tightens. She feels pressure instead of safety, obligation instead of desire. That's not bonding. That's burden. Women don't pull away because men are emotional. They pull away because the emotion is unstable, because it leaks urgency, because it signals that he needs her presence to feel okay. And neediness, no matter how softly it's packaged, feels heavy. What women respond to is presence. The ability to be emotionally available without being emotionally dependent. A man who can listen without collapsing into the story. Who can care without losing his center. Who can hold space without needing something back in return. That kind of emotional regulation is attractive because it communicates strength at a nervous system level. It tells her, I'm steady. You don't have to manage me. And when she doesn't have to manage you, she can relax into herself. That's the difference most men miss. They think opening up means giving more. In reality, it means staying grounded while she opens up. It means not hijacking the emotional moment with your own insecurities. It means allowing closeness to develop without rushing to secure it. Presence creates pull. Neediness creates pressure. A woman wants to feel connected to a man, not responsible for him. She wants to feel met, not leaned on. When you understand that distinction, emotional connection stops repelling women and starts drawing them in naturally. Presence is attractive. Neediness is not. At this point, the question isn't whether emotional connection matters. It's how to create it without losing yourself in the process. Because here's the truth most men never hear. Emotional bonding is not a personality trait. It's a skill. And like any skill, it can be practiced without turning you into someone you're not. It starts with curiosity that isn't strategic. Not questions designed to impress, but questions that reveal identity. The kind that invite her to step out of autopilot. When you ask a woman who she really is beneath her roles, she feels seen instead of assessed. And being seen is one of the fastest ways to create attachment. But connection doesn't come from questions alone. It comes from how you respond. Most men hear words. Very few hear emotion. When you reflect how she feels instead of parroting what she says, her system registers resonance. She doesn't feel like she's talking at you. She feels like she's connecting with you. That sense of emotional attunement builds trust without effort. Then there are shared emotional anchors, private jokes, small rituals, moments that belong only to the two of you. These don't need to be dramatic. In fact, the smaller they are, the more powerful they become. They create memory, and memory creates meaning. Over time, thinking of you triggers a feeling, not just an image. Another crucial piece most men get wrong is the urge to fix. When she vents, she's not asking for solutions. She's asking to be understood. The man who can sit with her discomfort without trying to control it signals emotional leadership. He shows that he's not overwhelmed by emotion, his own or hers. That steadiness is deeply attractive. And finally, there's restraint. The less you try to impress her, the safer you feel. Performance creates pressure. Authentic presence creates ease. When you're not trying to win her, she stops feeling like she's being evaluated and starts feeling like she's being invited. This is the paradox. Emotional bonds form fastest when you're not chasing them. You don't create connection by sacrificing your frame. You create it by staying centered while allowing closeness to develop naturally. That balance, openness without need, interest without urgency, is what separates men who are remembered from men who are replaced. Emotional connection isn't about giving more. It's about holding steady while something deeper forms. When a woman truly bonds with you, the entire dynamic changes, quietly but completely. She doesn't suddenly announce it. She doesn't make a dramatic declaration. She simply starts moving differently. Her desire deepens, not louder, not needier, deeper. Sex becomes less performative and more present. There's more eye contact, more openness, more willingness to give without being asked, because she's no longer protecting herself from you. Her loyalty shifts too, not in the sense of obligation, but orientation. You become the person she thinks of first, the one she wants to tell things to, the one she compares others against without realizing she's doing it. Even when you're not around, your presence lingers because her body has learned that being connected to you feels regulating. And vulnerability follows naturally. She shares more of herself, not because you pulled it out of her, but because she feels safe enough to let it surface. When a woman bonds at the nervous system level, she stops managing how she's perceived. She doesn't need to impress you. She doesn't need to stay guarded. She trusts that who she is will be received, not judged or used. This is where men often misunderstand what's happening. They think she's staying because they did something right, or because they finally said the right thing, or because they won her. But bonding doesn't work that way. She's not staying because you convinced her. She's staying because her body chose you. That choice shows up as ease, as consistency, as a quiet pull that doesn't need to be chased or reinforced. You're no longer trying to hold her attention. You already occupy a place inside her emotional world. And notice what isn't happening here. You're not chasing. You're not begging. You're not over-explaining your value. You're being chosen. This is the level most men never reach because they keep trying to stimulate desire instead of cultivating attachment. They confuse intensity with depth and urgency with connection. But the man who understands bonding doesn't rush. He doesn't force. He allows her system to settle. And once it does, it doesn't want to leave. She doesn't stay because she should. She stays because her body feels right with you. By now, you should see the pattern clearly. Sex opens the door. But emotional connection is what makes her lock it from the inside. Most men spend their lives trying to be more exciting, sharper, louder, more impressive. And they keep losing women not because they're unattractive, but because nothing about them feels settling. Nothing tells her nervous system, you're safe here. That's why the cycle repeats. Great night, strong chemistry, Silence afterward. Not because she's broken, not because dating is unfair, but because stimulation alone never creates attachment. Real attraction isn't noisy. It doesn't announce itself with drama or urgency. It's quiet. It's slow. It's the feeling of ease that grows when a woman doesn't need to protect herself around you, when her body stops scanning for danger, when being with you feels better than being alone. That's what makes a man unforgettable. If you don't understand this, you'll keep confusing desire with connection. You'll keep chasing intensity, wondering why it never turns into loyalty. And you'll keep telling yourself the story that women are unpredictable, when in reality, their behavior follows a very consistent emotional logic. But once you understand how bonding actually works, you stop chasing. You stop proving. You stop trying to secure outcomes that were never meant to be forced. You become the man who stays calm while others grasp, present while others perform, chosen while others compete. If this shifted how you see attraction, hit subscribe. If you've lived the experience of doing everything right and still losing her, leave a comment. You're not alone, and you're not wrong for wanting clarity. Any man can touch her body.